Her male best friend sneered. She'd be better off without you. When I shut him down, my girlfriend snapped, apologized. Or we're done. I smiled and replied, then we're done, sweetheart. My name is Sam. I am 33 and I work as a plumber in Nashville. Most of my days start early because service calls tend to pile up before noon. Some days I am home by late afternoon. Other days I am fixing a broken pipe at 9 o'clock at night. I own a small 2-story townhouse on the east side of the city. It is not fancy, but I bought it myself after years of long hours and weekend jobs. My girlfriend is Mila. She is 29 and works as a florist at a boutique flower shop downtown. We had been together a little over 2 years when this happened. Mila moved into my place about 8 months earlier after the rent at her old apartment went up and the building was being renovated. Our routine was pretty simple. I handled the mortgage utilities and the general upkeep of the house. She paid for groceries and smaller shared expenses. Most nights we had dinner together, unless I was stuck finishing an emergency plumbing call somewhere across town. Mila had a male best friend named Paul, who had been around long before I met her. From what she told me, they met in college and stayed close after graduation. I never had a problem with that idea. Adults have long-term friendships, and I am not the type to compete with someone who existed before the relationship. But Paul was around more than I expected. Sometimes Mila invited him over. Other times he would text her and show up later that evening. From the start, he treated my house like it was just an extension of Mila rather than a place I paid for. Shoes on the couch, helping himself to whatever was in the fridge, loud opinions about things that had nothing to do with him. At first I kept everything polite. He was technically a guest, and I do not enjoy pointless arguments. Still, there was always something under the surface with him. Small comments about how Mila deserved someone more exciting. Little jokes about how plumbing sounded like a boring life. Nothing big enough to explode into a fight. Just constant little digs. Whenever it happened, Mila would laugh and say that Paul had a sarcastic sense of humor. About 3 weeks ago, we had a small dinner at my place. Nothing complicated. A few friends take out food and a couple bottles of wine. Paul was there, of course. About an hour into the evening, the conversation drifted toward relationships and long-term plans. Paul looked at Mila, then at me, and casually said that she would be better off without me. The room went quiet, in the exact way it does when someone crosses a line, but pretends they did not. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. One of Mila's friends looked down at her glass. Another guy coughed and pretended to focus on his phone. Everyone in the room clearly understood that Paul had just stepped over a line. Paul, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair, like he had said something completely normal. Mila gave a short laugh that sounded more nervous than amused. I remember setting my glass down on the table and looking directly at him. I asked him to repeat what he just said. He shrugged and smiled in that casual way people use when they want to pretend they are joking after saying something serious. He said, "Relax, it was just an opinion." Then he added that Mila was smart, social, and full of energy, while I spent most of my time crawling under sinks and fixing toilets. He said it like it was a harmless observation. At that point, the room was completely silent. I asked him a simple question. I asked him why he thought it was appropriate to insult me in my own house. He rolled his eyes and said I was being sensitive. Then he said the sentence that really settled things for me. He said that if Mila had listened to him earlier, she probably would have found someone better already. That was when I stood up. Not aggressively. Not yelling. I just stood up from the table and looked at him for a moment. Then I told him something very clearly. I told him that he was a guest in my home, and he was done talking like that. I told him if he had an issue with me, he could keep it to himself, or he could leave. Paul laughed. Actually laughed. He leaned forward and said something about how I could not tell him what to say around Mila. That was when Mila suddenly stood up too. She looked irritated. Not at Paul, at me. Her voice got sharp in a way I had not heard before. She said I was embarrassing her by making a scene over something that was obviously a joke. Then she said I needed to apologize to Paul so everyone could relax and enjoy the evening. The entire table was staring at us. I remember looking at Mila for a few seconds because I honestly thought I misheard her. So I asked her to repeat that. She crossed her arms and said it again, louder this time. She said I needed to apologize to Paul for overreacting. Then she added one more sentence. She said if I refused to apologize, then we were done. That was the moment the whole situation became very simple for me. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue with Mila, and I did not insult Paul. I just looked around the table for a second and realized the evening was already over whether anyone admitted it or not. So I made a simple decision. I told everyone that dinner was finished and it was time for them to head out. At first, nobody moved. One of Mila's friends asked if I was serious. I told her yes, very calmly. I said I was not interested in hosting people in my house, while being told I needed to apologize for being insulted in my own living room. That seemed to break the tension. Chairs started sliding back. Someone grabbed their jacket. Another friend muttered something about the night getting awkward. Paul stayed seated. He leaned back in the chair again and gave me this smug half smile, like he thought the whole thing was some kind of performance. He asked if I was really kicking everyone out because of one comment. I told him I was asking everyone to leave because the evening was over. Then I looked directly at him and added that he should probably be the first one out the door. That finally got him to stand up. He said something under his breath about how I clearly had anger issues. I ignored it and walked toward the front door. Within a couple of minutes, people were grabbing bags, saying quick, awkward goodbyes, and stepping out onto the porch. The whole group cleared out faster than I expected. Paul was the last one walking down the front steps. Before he left, he turned back toward the doorway and shook his head like he was disappointed in me. He said Mila deserved better than someone who acted like this. I did not respond. I simply closed the door. The house got quiet immediately after. When I turned around, Mila was still standing near the dining table with her arms crossed. She looked furious, not embarrassed, not uncomfortable furious. The first thing she said was that I had just humiliated her in front of her friends. Then she asked me what the hell I thought I was doing. I told her exactly what I was doing. I was removing people who disrespected me from my house. She scoffed and said Paul had not disrespected me. She said he had only told. That was when I realized the dinner had never actually been about Paul. Mila kept standing near the table waiting for me to argue with her, but I did not feel like arguing anymore. Something about the way she said Paul was just telling the truth made the whole situation very clear in my head. I looked at her for a moment and then simply nodded. I told her, "All right." She looked confused by that. Then I walked past her and headed upstairs. At first, she did not follow me. I could hear her moving around the kitchen like she was expecting me to come back down and continue the argument. Instead, I walked straight into the bedroom and opened the closet. About half of the space was hers now. Dresses, jackets, shoes lined up along the bottom shelf. I grabbed the first empty laundry basket I could find and started putting her things inside. Nothing aggressive. I was careful with everything. Folded clothes shoes placed on top. A couple minutes later, Mila came upstairs. She stopped in the doorway and just stared at me. She asked what I was doing. I told her I was packing her things. At first, she laughed like she thought I was trying to scare her. Then she realized I was serious. Her tone changed immediately. She said I was being dramatic and needed to calm down. I kept folding clothes and placing them into the basket. I told her she gave me 2 options earlier. Apologize to Paul or the relationship was over. She opened her mouth like she was about to argue, but stopped. Then she said that was not what she meant. My head. I told her that was exactly what she meant, because she said it very clearly in front of 6 people. She walked into the room and asked if I was really ending a 2-year relationship over one stupid dinner argument. I told her no. I was ending it because she demanded I apologize to a guy who insulted me in my own house and then said he was right. That was when she got angry again. She said Paul was only trying to look out for her. She said sometimes people outside the relationship can see problems more clearly. I placed another stack of her clothes into the basket and looked at her. I told her if Paul cared that much about her living situation, then she was welcome to go stay with him. That was when she realized I was not bluffing. For a few seconds, Mila just stood there staring at the laundry basket in my hands. I could see the moment it finally registered that I was not trying to scare her, and I was not bluffing. Her voice shifted from angry to shocked. She asked if I was seriously throwing her out of the house. I reminded her that the house belonged to me, and that she had already made it clear the relationship was over if I did not apologize. She said that was not how she meant it. I told her those were still the words she chose. She started pacing around the bedroom like she was trying to figure out how the situation had turned around on her so quickly. Then she said something that honestly surprised me. She said I was choosing my ego over our relationship. I placed another folded stack of her clothes into the basket and told her that was not what was happening. What was happening was that she had chosen Paul over basic respect. She immediately pushed back on that and said Paul had done nothing wrong. According to her, he was just being honest and I should have handled it like an adult instead of kicking everyone out. That was when I stopped packing for a second and looked at her. I asked her a very simple question. If one of my friends had come into our house and told her she would be better off without me, would she have laughed it off? She did not answer. Instead, she said, I was twisting the situation. So I went back to packing. Within about 10 minutes, I had 2 baskets and 1 small suitcase filled with most of the things she used daily. Clothes, shoes, makeup, bag from the bathroom. Mila followed me downstairs while continuing to argue. She kept saying I was overreacting and that normal couples work through disagreements. I set the baskets near the front door and grabbed her suitcase. Then I opened the door. The night air outside was quiet and the streetlights were already on. When I turned back toward her, she looked genuinely stunned. She asked me where exactly she was supposed to go. I shrugged and reminded her that Paul seemed very confident about what was best for her, so he was probably a good place to start. For a moment, Mila did not move. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the open front door, then back at the basket sitting on the floor. I could see the argument forming in her head again, but something about the situation had clearly shifted. The confidence she had earlier during dinner was gone. Now she looked uncertain. She asked me if I was really going to make her leave in the middle of the night. I told her it was barely past 9 o'clock, and Nashville was not exactly shutting down for the evening. Then I added that she had plenty of options. Friends, co-workers, and of course Paul. The moment I said his name, her expression tightened. She said I was being petty by bringing him into it. I reminded her that he had already inserted himself into the situation earlier that night. For a few seconds, she just stood there staring at me like she expected me to suddenly change my mind. When that did not happen, she walked over to the door and looked down at the baskets. She picked one up slowly. Then she grabbed the suitcase handle. Before stepping outside, she turned back toward me. Her voice had lost most of the anger now and sounded more defensive than anything else. She said I was going to regret this once I cooled down. According to her, I was letting one stupid comment ruin everything we had built over 2 years. I leaned against the wall near the doorway and shook my head. I told her the relationship ended the moment she demanded I apologize to someone who insulted me in my own home. She stared at me for another second, like she was waiting for some kind of emotional reaction, but there really was not one. I had already made the decision upstairs. Finally, she stepped out onto the porch. She carried one basket to the sidewalk and then came back for the second. The suitcase rolled behind her as she walked down the short path toward the street. She never looked back again after that. About 30 seconds later, headlights appeared at the end of the block. A car slowed down and pulled up next to her. I watched from the doorway as she loaded her things into the back seat and climbed in. Then the car drove away. The house became completely quiet again. After the car disappeared down the street, I closed the front door and locked it. The house felt strange for a minute. Not sad, just quiet, in a way it had not been in a while. Dinner plates were still sitting on the table, and a couple half-empty glasses were next to the sink. The evening had ended so abruptly that nobody bothered cleaning anything. I walked around the house for a few minutes, turning off lights and picking up small things people had left behind. Then I sat down on the couch. About 5 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. Mila. I watched it ring without answering. It stopped. Then it rang again. I let that one go too. After the third call, I finally picked up the phone and opened the message notifications. The first message was short. She said I needed to stop being ridiculous and answer the phone so we talk like adults. The second message said she was staying at a friend's place for the night and expected us to work things out in the morning. The third message was longer. She wrote that I had overreacted because I felt embarrassed in front of everyone. According to her, Paul only said what many people were probably thinking anyway. I read that message twice. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed exactly what I needed to know. There was no apology in anything she sent. No acknowledgement that Paul crossed a line. Just more explanations about why I was wrong. So I made another simple decision. First, I opened her contact and blocked the number. Then I opened my social apps and removed her there too. It took less than 30 seconds. I did not do it out of anger. Honestly, the whole thing felt more like closing a door that had already been halfway shut for a while. Once it was done, I set the phone on the table and went back to cleaning up the kitchen. About an hour later, my phone buzzed again. It said, "Sam, we need to talk." No greeting, no explanation. Just that. I did not need to guess who it was. Nobody else would suddenly text me from an unknown number right after Mila got blocked. Paul. I set the phone down on the counter and finished rinsing a couple plates before picking it up again. 2 more messages had already arrived. The second one said kicking Mila out like that was messed up. The third one said I needed to call him so we could fix the situation. That one actually made me laugh a little. Fix the situation. The guy who insulted me in my own house now wanted to mediate the problem he helped create. I typed one short reply. I told him there was nothing to fix. About 10 seconds later, the phone rang. Same unknown number. I declined the call. Immediately another message popped up. He asked what my problem was and said I needed to stop acting like a child. Then he said Mila was really upset and that I needed to think about what I was doing. I read the message once and then locked the phone again. But Paul kept going. Another message came through. He said if I had any respect for Mila, I would at least talk to him like a man instead of hiding behind block numbers. I ignored that one. A few minutes passed and I went back to cleaning the kitchen. Then my phone rang again. Different number. When I answered, Mila was on the line. She sounded nothing like she did earlier that night. Her voice was shaky and rushed. The first thing she said was that Paul had kicked her out of his apartment. Apparently she showed up there expecting him to help her for the night. Instead, they argued. According to her, he said the whole situation was now her problem, and he did not want drama at his place. After that, he told her she needed to leave. She said she ended up standing outside with her bags and nowhere to go. Then her tone completely changed. She started begging. She said she was sorry about everything that happened at dinner. She said she should have defended me instead of backing Paul. She kept repeating that she made a mistake and asked if she could come back so we could talk. By the end of the call, she was practically pleading with me to forgive her. For a few seconds, I did not say anything. Mila kept talking on the other end of the phone. Her voice rushed and desperate now. It sounded completely different from the confident tone she had earlier that night when she demanded I apologize to Paul. She kept repeating that she made a mistake. She said she should never have defended him. She said she did not realize how serious the situation was until he told her to leave his apartment. Then she asked again if she could come back to the house so we could fix things. I leaned back against the kitchen counter and let her finish. When she finally stopped talking, I answered as calmly as I had the entire evening. I told her I was not angry anymore. That part was actually true. But I also told her the situation had already passed, the point where an apology could reset everything. There was a long pause on the line after that. Then she asked quietly if I was really refusing to let her come back. I told her yes. Not because she had won argument with me, but because she showed me exactly where I stood when Paul disrespected me, and she chose his side in front of everyone. She tried to interrupt me, and started apologizing again. I let her finish. Then I gave her a practical suggestion. I reminded her that her parents lived about 30 minutes outside Nashville. I also mentioned that her older sister had an apartment across town. Either of those places made more sense than coming back to my house. She went silent for a few seconds after that. Then she asked if I was seriously ending everything over this. I told her she already ended it earlier that night when she gave me the ultimatum. Another long pause followed. Finally, she started begging again. At that point, I knew the conversation was going nowhere, so I told her I hoped she got somewhere safe for the night. Then I hung up. After that, I opened the contact and blocked that number too. It was the third number blocked that night. Once it was done, the phone finally stopped ringing. After I blocked the last number, the house finally stayed quiet. No more calls, no more messages, no more people trying to explain why the situation I watched unfold in my own living room somehow was not what I thought it was. I finished cleaning the kitchen and put the last glass in the dishwasher. The dining table was empty again. About 2 hours earlier, that same table had 6 people sitting around it, eating takeout and talking about random things. Now the house felt completely still, but honestly, it did not feel bad, just calm. I sat on the couch for a while and thought about the entire night from the beginning. The part that stood out the most was not actually what Paul said. People say stupid things all the time. What mattered was what Mila did immediately after. She did not shut him down. She did not tell him he crossed a line. Instead, she looked straight at me and demanded I apologize to him in my own house. That moment told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in that relationship. After that realization, the rest of the night was just logistics. Asking people to leave, packing her things, closing the door, blocking numbers. None of it required anger, just decisions. The morning I woke up earlier than usual. For a second, I expected to hear someone moving around in the kitchen, the way Mila usually did before work. Instead, the house was quiet again. I made coffee, checked my phone, and saw there were no new messages. Apparently, the message had finally gotten through. Later that day, I changed the lock on the front door, not because I expected Mila to come back, but because it made sense to fully close the situation. 2 years of a relationship ended in about 3 hours. And the strange part is that once it was over, the entire thing suddenly felt very simple. Bye-bye.